Good morning, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining us today, and welcome to the Chulalongkorn University's Faculty of Education Teaching English as a Foreign Language Webinar Series II, a conversation with ELT scholars. I am Joey Andrew Santos, your moderator for this session. Before we formally begin, allow me to give you some house rules. First, please ensure that you use the name that you've registered with us. Second, please keep your microphone on mute. And lastly, if you wish to join for later's conversation, please feel free to send your comments or your questions via Zoom chat, and we'll be happy to read them for you. And to formally start today's conversation, let us welcome the director of the Teaching English as a Foreign Language program, Assistant Professor Dr. Ponpimon Sukawati, for her welcome message.
Okay, well, thank you, Joey, for introducing me. So welcome everyone to TEFL Webinar Series II, organized by TEFL Program Faculty of Education, Chulalongkorn University. Well, to begin with, I'd like to thank the honorable speakers for contributing your time to be the panel in this academic dialogue. And thanks to the audience for starting your day to be with us. It's very early. And the talk today would be in a casual manner. This is the reasons that we are all friends and colleagues in academia. And from now on, we are going to learn and share with the invited scholars how to solve the myth of reading. We have Dr. Richard Day from the University of Hawaii and Dr. Willie Renania from National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technological University, who will share their global view. And we have Dr. Pornapit Darasawang from King Mongkut University of Technology, Thonburi, and Dr. Damrong Adunyaritikun from Thammasat. And from Thammasat to share their local view. So let's enjoy the dialogue entitled Why Reading is Good for L2 Students and Teachers. Enjoy.
Thank you very much, Assistant Professor Dr. Ponpimon, for that welcome message. Reading is very important, particularly in this disruptive era. And today's session, titled Why Reading is Good for L2 Students and Teachers, is a very must-attend session. And of course, joining our panel, first, let me introduce them formally. Our first speaker is Associate Professor in the Department of English, the Liberal Arts at Thammasat University in Thailand. His research interests include reading comprehension, self-perception, and motivation to read, and critical literacy. Let us welcome Associate Professor Damrong Adunyaritikun. Hello, Ajahn.
Good morning.
Morning. Our next speaker is Vice President for Internationalization at King Mongkut University of Technology, Thonburi. She obtained her PhD in TESOL from the University of Edinburgh. Her research interests are learner autonomy, self-access learning, and teacher education. Let us welcome Associate Professor Dr. Pornapit Darasawang. Hello, Ajahn. Our next speaker is a language teacher educator with extensive teaching experience in Asia. He currently teaches applied linguistics courses at the National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. He is a frequent plenary speaker at ELT international conferences and has published extensively in the area of second language education. His publications include Language Teaching Methodology, an anthology of current practice by Cambridge University Press, Student-Centered Cooperative Learning in 2019 by Springer International, and a recently published book chapter in Growing Our Research Impact, still by Springer International. He maintains a large language teacher professional development called Teachers' Voices in Facebook. Please welcome Dr. Willie Renania. Hello, Ajahn.
Morning to you.
And to complete our list of speakers for today, he is a professor in the Department of Second Language Studies at University of Hawaii at Manoa. He was a visiting professor at Ubon Ratchathani University for several years. He began his career in teaching English as a foreign language in Seoul, South Korea. After getting his undergraduate degree, he was a Peace Corps volunteer and taught English in a high school in Dessie, Ethiopia. He is the author of numerous publications, particularly on second language reading. His publications include New Ways in Teaching Reading, and he is the co-author of Extensive Reading in the Second Language Classroom and the co-editor of Extensive Reading Activities for Teaching Language. He is also the co-author of Impact Issues Book 1 to 3 and Book 1 to 4. Let us welcome Professor Dr. Richard Day. Thanks everyone for joining us today. And I think that our conversation will be best partnered with coffee and perhaps a book for us to understand why we really need to read these days. So to start this conversation, I would like our speakers to share your experience in researching reading and your learnings from the decades of L2 reading research. Maybe we can start with Associate Professor Dr. Damrong Kap.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Chulalongkorn University for inviting me to join this friendly conversation about reading, which I really love to share my experience here. Well, I would like to
go off stage. Sorry, Ajahn Damrong. Can I go off stage? Can you set me up? Thank you.
Okay. I would like to start talking about a brief account of reading research, especially in L2 first. In the past 35 years, reading theorists, a lot of reading theorists have shared their view of reading process. For example, Labers and Samuel in 1974 helped us understand about the process of reading and leads us to believe in framing reading instruction. And reading seemed to be a decoding processing, which means reader need to have ability to decode text from parts to whole, from the smallest unit to the larger units. Okay, and they needed to understand sound symbol relationship. They need to have some kind of linguistic knowledge, syntactic knowledge. This had to be processed automatically in order to understand codes and their meaning. And reading teacher needed to pay attention to instructions such as phonics, phonemic awareness, word recognition, grammatical instruction, things like that. And beliefs in reading seem to change when researchers like Ken Goodman, Jetta Goodman, Krashen, or Frank Smith propose a new paradigm of reading. And learning to read is a natural process starting from what is in our head, from our knowledge of the words, from cultural knowledge, things like that, in order to hypothesize text and to make sense of the text. And reading instruction has swung from phonic instruction to language experience approach and whole language approach. L2, and after that, it seems that L2 readers in the last decades, like Patricia Carroll, William Klebe, Elizabeth Bernhardt, have helped expand our understanding of reading processes, especially to the interactive process of reading. And besides that, some other researchers like Professor Day, Professor William Brenanya, or even Professor Panapit Naraswang also helped shed the light on new areas of reading, such as extensive reading, learner autonomy, things like that, or even some kind of effective domains such as self-efficacy, self-perception, or motivation to read, like what Professor Willie Brenanya have done a lot in order to promote this kind of thing. Next, that I would like to talk about, one of the questions that we have discussed that we want to talk here is about goal of teaching reading and what kind of reader that we should help to raise in our society. Can I share my slide here? I have a few slides. We try to teach learner in order to attain the followings like textual dexterity and literate disposition. What are these two terms that I need to talk about? When we mention about textual dexterity, readers with textual dexterity need to have a wide variety of reading strategy and background information, background knowledge, and they can use these kind of things when they have to read and make use of this effectively and strategically. Besides this, reader also can use reading in order to improve their life quality or well-being and also become global citizens, I would say. And even what we would aim to, like, they should be able to contribute to democratic development. To make it simple, when we talk about textual dexterity, we can say that readers with textual dexterity are proficient text breaker. That means they can make use of their strategy or word recognition skill in order to understand meaning of the text. They are proficient text participant. That means they comprehend the text. They are proficient text user. That means they are able to make use of reading in order to do something else, like in order to improve their life quality. Or last, they are proficient text analysts. That means they are able to make criticism. They can analyze what they read. Second that I like to mention is literate disposition, which include reading engagement, motivation to read, self-efficacy, and even others, such as reading attitudes. I think good readers are attentively engaged in readings and meaning making from text, and they are motivated to read. They have curiosity and eagerness to learn from reading. No matter what reading obstacle they have or reading difficulty they encounter, they will be persistent and move forward to learning from reading. And they also perceive themselves as able readers, feel competence in their ability to read and make use of their resources to make sense of the text. And of course, they even value themselves as skilled readers. The other thing that is very important when we mention about teaching reading. Before that, I like to share this picture, which is the ecology of reading classroom. I like to compare to this rice field, okay, which has the emerald green beauty of rice, and one day we would aims that it would full of gold colored grains of rice at the end. You know, we, of course, the one that who can make change for this would be here, farmer. And we do need professional farmer, knowledgeable farmer who can know the rice seeds in order to grow. They know exactly what they need to prepare for, such as planting location, fertilizer, soil. They need to prepare for good environment in order to plant rice, okay? And of course, they need to care for seedling. I try to compare this kind of thing with our reading classroom. The important mechanism is teacher. We need reading or capable teacher who can create learning environment that help promote learning to read. But in any rate, in many schools, teachers of other disciplines, like in our country, in Thailand, you know, such as social study, foreign languages are assigned to teach reading, especially in English. I do understand the situation that we have the shortage of English teachers or reading teacher in our country, especially in the remote areas. These teachers may not be well prepared or ill prepared to provide reading instruction. But again, my underlining point here is that we need competent and professional teacher in order to teach our kids to become good readers. Then we need to prepare those teachers to become professional reading teacher. Then reading teacher become an important mechanism to drive and become the key to advancing the reading success of our kids. it's very important that teachers themselves needs to be active, strategic, and self-regulated readers. Okay. Otherwise, they are not able to become, role models or demonstrator of all kind of reading instruction. And they need to be trained how to teach reading and keep themselves updated through professional training. But it's up to the teacher to design what works best for the student based on what instructional approaches or what reading intervention should be taught, or how particular approaches can be applied and modified to be more effective in a particular instructional context. But at the forefront, I think we do need professional teachers. And of course, we need to provide good pre-service preparation for incoming teachers. And also we do need to provide in-service teachers with professional training. This will make our teacher become, professional and ready to teach reading, provide good reading instruction in order to meet our kids' literacy needs. Okay, I in the first round.
Thank you very much. That's very comprehensive, Professor Damrong. Let's now listen from Dr. Whaley Cap.
Yes, thank you so much, Ajahn Damrong. That was a very comprehensive introduction to the huge body of literature, in the area of reading, instruction, second language reading, research, and all that. One thing that I would like to highlight from many, many years of research, which to me is very important, is this very simple idea that we learn to read by reading. Children learn to read by reading. We also learn to read by reading. Let me translate that into something that is more, that is easier for us to relate to. If you do a lot of reading, chances are your ability to read with understanding, with comprehension also will increase a great deal. In other words, I'm referring to this very important concept of fluency in reading. It is very important that we develop our students' fluency in reading, their ability to read fairly quickly, with great understanding and with great enjoyment as well. I think we'll be doing a good job if we are able to get our students to read regularly on a daily basis, maybe half an hour a day over a longer period of time, maybe 6 months, maybe 1 year, or maybe 2 years. If we look at what is often happening in the classroom, is that students are usually exposed to a very short text, maybe only 1 page long. And then that is only done every other week or maybe weekly. So 1 reading passage a week. After 1 year, the students get to read only, I don't know, maybe 30 pages worth of reading. That to me is not reading. That to me is, I would call it painful reading, if you like. It's the kind of reading that is useful, for the teachers to keep students busy in the classroom. But I don't think it's going to help our students to develop this fluency in reading. Fluency in reading can only be developed if the students or if the teachers get the students to read on a regular basis, every day, every single day, half an hour a day. I think we all know that fluency is not given a lot of attention in our teaching, in high school, in primary school. But very often teachers are busy giving students work, giving students tasks and activities to do. Now, these are interesting tasks and activities, but these tasks and activities actually do not contribute very much to the reading fluency, to the reading proficiency of our students. These activities can be very interesting. The students may be having fun, and the teachers may also be having a lot of fun and are able to fill in the classroom time. But in terms of real improvement in reading in our students, I don't think we can expect very much. What I've learned again from years and years of thinking about reading is that we need to provide a lot of opportunities for our students to experience the reading itself. The more reading, the better. Richard, I'm sure you would agree with me 100% because I learned all this from Richard, actually.
1000%, Willie.
Thank you so much, Dr. I think that's the best time now to transition to the teacher, Professor Richard, right? Let's hear it from you.
Okay, well, actually, the previous two speakers took away everything I was going to say. So now I'm sort of going to improvise off the top of my head. So one of the things that I have focused on when I am teaching my graduate students about teaching reading is that, as Willie said, we learn to read only one way, by reading. And of course, the research, both in first and foreign language, clearly shows that the more students read, the better readers they become. And it doesn't matter if it's your first, your second, your third, your fourth, we have to read. Now, this brings me to something that I work with on my students, and that is what I call the foreign language reading teacher metaphor. A foreign language reading teacher metaphor. And I ask them to say, what do they think how do they complete this sentence? A foreign language reading teacher is a, now you complete it with a noun. Everybody think for a minute. What is your metaphor for a foreign language reading teacher? Now, there's no right or wrong to this. This is how you view the Ajahns' role in teaching reading. Okay? Now, I'm going to share with you one. I actually have two metaphors, and I guess I'll share them both. The first one is that a foreign language reading teacher is a cheerleader. Yes, you can do it. Read, read, read. You did it. You read a book. Yes. Read another one. Okay. A cheerleader, a foreign language. All right. Now, my second one is very, very different. A foreign language reading teacher is a drug dealer. A drug dealer. Why? Because the teacher's job is to get her students hooked on books, addicted to reading. And the research is really clear about this, that if the teacher is a role model and engages in reading, the students will pick it up, will get addicted to. Now, I want to share with you one more thing before I yield the floor. I don't want to talk too long. Is a number of years ago, I was teaching reading at Ubon Ratchathani University. Now, those of you who are Thai know exactly where that is. It's in a very poor area of Thailand. And I was teaching first-year students reading. And it turns out that they really didn't read in Thai. They really didn't read in Thai. So I had them engaged in reading very easy, interesting books that they selected, a type of extensive reading. And they would read very easy, interesting books that they chose. And if they didn't like it, they'd put it down and get another book and read it. And guess what happened? They really enjoyed reading in English. Now, here's what I'm going to share with you while I'm telling you this story, is that something else happened to a number of my Thai students. They started to read for pleasure in Thai because they were enjoying it in English. And they thought, well, if I'm doing this in a foreign language, how about my first language? So I have researched this and I've come up with this hypothesis. It's called the foreign language reading reverse transfer hypothesis. Generally, we think of transfer in reading from the L1 to the FL, to the second or foreign language. But in my hypothesis here, it's the reverse. It goes from the foreign to the first, a foreign language reading reverse transfer hypothesis. And this is something that I've been researching and it's quite exciting. Okay. As we say in Hawaii, I'm POW. Willie, you know what that means.
Yes, I do. Yes.
Tell us.
Yes, he's done.
Yes. Okay.
Thank
For
you so
now.
much, Professor Day.
For now, yeah.
For now, he'll say more.
Okay.
Later.
Thank you very much. But let us now listen to how about the practical ways, and that is to be offered by Associate Professor Dr. Poina Pitcap.
Okay, thank you very much. I have to tell all of you that at first I was juggling between what I should share about cognitive science or about learner autonomy, which I have done research for a long time. And at the end, I thought that, okay, it would be about learner autonomy because it has linked with what Willie, Ajahn Damrong, and Professor Richard talk about. First of all, when you talk about the extensive reading, from the point of view of learner autonomy research, the learner autonomy research, I have to say that we focus on process-oriented and we focus on learning experiences. So out-of-class learning is something that have been done a lot recently. And in out-of-class learning, we would like to see what learning experiences the learners have encountered in the out-of-class learning. For example, if the out-of-class learning is related to reading, it is closely related to extensive reading. Because in out-of-class learning, we tend to measure the vocabulary that the learners have gained, have acquired, things like that. And we can see that there are a lot of times that incidental learning, which come from extensive reading, has been shown in learner autonomy research. So I would like to confirm that why we have to do extensive reading. It is because not just only the learners have a learning experience, but they also good learning experience. I mean, good learning experience because they have to apply their motivation, their self-efficacy in order to be engaged in the out-of-class learning. And another thing is that they can develop the vocabulary, a lot of vocabulary, collocation, yes. A lot of things, okay? But in the first thing that I focus on is out-of-class learning, which has been done a lot in the area of learner autonomy. The second one is self-access learning, because we have set up all around the world, they set up facilities in order to encourage the learner to use facilities that we already have some kind of support in that facilities. For example, we may have something about learner training. We may have something that helps learner to reflect on what they've been through. Something that they have to report back, such as the evaluation of the research of reading strategies that they have gone through. And at the end, what they have learned from that. So the conscious learning like this is very important in the area of learner autonomy. And I'm sure that there has been a lot of research in reading area as well. The third one, the research that I would like to focus on in relation to reading and learner autonomy is the use of technology in encouraging learner autonomy and also encouraging reading. When we use technology in research on learner autonomy, there are two things. The first one is that we want to develop learner autonomy through the use of technology. The other thing is that we want the students to be autonomous enough in order to engage in technology, using technology, in order for them to use it successfully. So from the research in this field in technology, again, it is closely related to out-of-class learning, because in out-of-class learning, it doesn't have to be printed, that we have to read printed, the printed matters. We can use all kinds of technology, all kinds of texts in order to encourage the learners to be engaged in out-of-class learning. So at the moment, mobile learning, computer-assisted learning, which is not very, we don't use that much. But most of the time, using computer, the learners are in front of the screen every day. So how can we encourage them to make use of the screen more effectively?
Right.
Not just only in class, but also in out-of-class learning context as well. So this is something that we have to think about, how to help them to be more autonomous readers.
Right.
So this is what I would like to share for, in the first round.
Good. Good.
And I'm going to
Thank you
elaborate more in the second and third round. Okay, thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. I think that's a very perfect way to springboard to the next discussion as we talk about the practical concerns in really putting the theories and the researches into practice. So let's start with the first round. Let's start the second round rather with what are the implications of the body of research for L2 reading instruction? Perhaps I would like to invite Associate Professor Dr. Damrong.
Let me share my slide again. Okay. For over 30 years of L2 reading research, when I prepared this talk, I'm asking myself this question: what do reading teachers need to be aware of L2 readings? Okay, and here's the thing that I like to propose. First, L2 reading success considerably depends on background knowledge, but actually, there are tons of research that have proved that background knowledge is very important. Just teaching sound symbol relationships or grammar alone will not contribute to students' reading success. And one of the important factors is background knowledge, and we all admit that background knowledge has positive impact on reader comprehension, help readers become critical thinkers, and make them become engaged in reading. But unfortunately, recent research has shown that concern of background knowledge is ignored by teachers in reading instruction. Then our students need to learn how to activate that background knowledge and also how to gain additional background knowledge. What I mean by background knowledge is include knowledge of the word, vocabulary knowledge, knowledge in relation to content of the text, or cultural knowledge too. What I would like to stress here is that our students need to learn how to activate their existing higher knowledge and also dig deep into additional background information to help them understand when they read. Please keep in mind that the more they know before they read, the better they understand when they read. Second point is direct explicit instruction on reading strategy is needed for our students as early as possible. L2 reading research for decades has proven that explicit instruction on reading strategies help L2 readers improve their reading comprehension and reading success. Many readers benefit greatly, especially struggling readers. They benefit greatly from explicit instruction how to use reading strategy before, during, and after reading. And they learn how to enhance and monitor their comprehension and how to deal with reading challenges strategically. A lot of research has demonstrated that there is a need to teach many strategies to be used in concert. It's not just to teach strategy and use it alone, okay? But they need to to be used in concert. For example, the reciprocal teaching procedure, KWL, collaborative strategic reading, concept-oriented reading instruction, or sometimes it's called CORI. Let me illustrate this point. I like to talk about the reciprocal teaching procedure, which is a metacognitive strategy instruction that help guide kids to learn comprehension foreseeing and comprehension monitoring. And they would learn in social and supportive context. That means teacher would provide guidance and demonstration of how to use reading strategy, and they would have conversation with teacher, with students, and they would really read and try out those kind of reading strategy. They will get support, they will get questions from their friends and peers. Those strategies that would be taught are predicting, clarifying, questioning, and summarizing. Okay, and this strategy approach has been proven in L1 context and L2 context. Even in Thailand too, there are a lot of research that has proved the reciprocal teaching that is effective enough to be used with L2 reader, no matter what level it is. Could be at college level and high school level. Third, word identification, linguistic knowledge, and reading fluency, which Professor Day just mentioned, and really also mentioned, that should be promoted synergistically with reading strategies. Besides teaching reading strategy, word recognition, word attack, we help them to analyze word, the root of word, prefix, suffix, things like that. Word analysis should be taught in order to help reader decode text and make meaning from text. Even grammar, people might question whether we should teach grammar in reading class. Yes, I still believe that L2 readers need to learn grammar, but it needs to be just particular grammar points need to be taught in context. And then in order to promote fluency, we need to, help them to use these kind of strategy and word identification skill when they read. At that point, they would learn how this kind of thing works in context. To promote reading fluency, there are a lot of instructional approaches that you could use, such as choral reading, echo reading, sustained silent reading. What does it mean? You could ask them to, you could read aloud and have them, repeat what you read, things like that. Okay, this might help you to learn word identification and grammar points, that you have mini workshop on that, and also they would learn how it works in context. Fourth, I think this one is quite important. Teachers need to create supportive, engaging learning and reading environment which promote comprehension development. This will bring about reading engagement, motivation to read, and attain higher degree of self-efficacy, which I already mentioned about literate disposition. There are many ways that we could do, like promote social interaction in the classroom by having teacher have interaction with student, or student have interaction, among themselves. But one thing that I need to make you aware of, please keep in mind that our students have been away from classroom for over a year, okay, because of the pandemic. When they come back to our reading classroom on site, we might have to re-skill on how to have, social interaction, how to work collaboratively with other people, okay? Besides promoting social interaction, teacher might need to set aside times for reading in the classroom. Okay, we could have sustained silent reading. Okay, have them, or even make use of some kind of strategy like extensive reading. Provide them some, books to read in the classroom. Teacher needs to introduce good books and provide choices of reading, which Professor Day already mentioned that. The other thing is writing about text. After you have them read, we might ask them to write about what they read. There are many forms of writing. For example, for narrative text, teacher may introduce, story grammar. After they read, introduce story grammar. Like when they read narrative text, they need to know about characters, theme, setting, plot, and they express what they think about that story. And the other point that I like to make here is about building partnership with family and community to build reader literacy development. I think this one is very important since, family and community are resources of knowledge or funds of knowledge. Bringing parents and people in their community to classroom to share their expertise, to share their knowledge in the classroom, that will help our kids build their learning from their local knowledge and also motivate them to learn to read. Besides that, parents also learn what school have done to help their kids learn to read, okay? And then they can apply what they learned in the classroom from teacher when they have some kind of reading activity at home with their kids, okay? Then I would say school, families, and community can work hand in hand to support their children's reading development. I would like to use Professor Dave's words like how for this round.
Thank you very much. That is a very clear way
Yes.
of articulating the implications and, of course, what the body of knowledge has offered. And thank you very much, Professor
Yes.
Damrong. Let's now listen from Dr. Willie Cap.
Yes, one implication from research and from years of experience is this. Point number one, when we teach reading, is for us to be very, very careful when we choose the kind of reading passages that we want to do use in the classroom. Yes. The text selection is extremely important. It has to be two things. Number one, at the student's level, maybe a little bit challenging is okay, but below the student's level is also okay. As long as the students can read with understanding, I think you have done a good job in selecting the right kind of material. But more important than that is the content. The content will have to be something that the students can relate to. The kind of content that keeps the students engaged when they are reading the text selection. Dr. Day early on mentioned about us being a cheerleader. This is one application. If the text is exciting, if the text is interesting, I think you have done a good job of motivating, of getting your students interested in their reading. So text selection is very important. Point number two is the amount of text that you use in a reading lesson is also very important. Reading one small passage is way not enough. I think you have to increase the amount of text that the students are exposed to in the classroom. Yes. It may be the same content, but written in 3 different styles, but by 3 different people, so that the students get a lot more exposure, a lot more opportunity to interact, to understand the text content at the deeper level. So these are 2 things about the text. In terms of activities, in terms of tasks, we need to be thinking about this. How can we make our task, in such a way, how can we develop a task in such a way that the students want to read more after the lesson is over? I think that is extremely important. So one big principle we have to remember as a reading teacher is this: when your reading lesson ends, that should not be the end of the reading activities that your students should be doing. So think about an activity, a task that gets the students to be curious, to be interested to do more reading on their own, ideally. That's the idea behind self-directed learning by Ajahn Pon a bit early on. But also, with guidance from us, because sometimes kids don't know, what else or where to find the information that they want to read. So a good place, this is an opportunity for us to actually provide guidance, provide modeling if you need to. For example, if the reading lesson is about the pandemic or tourism in Hawaii, for example, tell the students where to find out more about Hawaii. That Hawaii is such a wonderful place, that the sun is always there every day, for example, and some rain occasionally. So important principle is how to keep the students engaged in doing the actual reading in the classroom, and also beyond the classroom. Yeah, the reading lesson, when it ends, it should not end. I think reading should lead to more reading. And that is how we apply the idea that people learn to read by reading, and there's no other way. If you're looking for something interesting, beyond the classroom, there are a lot of interesting resources out there that you can, direct your students to. You can provide links and things like that. For easy, relevant, interesting reading materials, I would suggest the Extensive Reading Central that was developed by a colleague of mine who is now here with us, and Professor Rob Waring from Japan. It's a wonderful, wonderful website. Yeah, if you don't really have a lot of time to explore the internet for resources, for reading resources, I would suggest that you, try this digital library. Very tech, tech related, Ajahn Panapit. And the name of the program is called X Reading. It's a wonderful, wonderful digital library with a lot of excellent graded reading collection, up to 1,000 plus. And the program has all the system that you need in order to engage your students. You can find relevant materials for your students. You can assess your students' progress, and you can actually check whether the students are doing the reading or not. The name of the program again is X Reading. It's not free, but it's not expensive either. Yeah.
I think Rob sent the link in the chat.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, and the man who developed that program is here with us, and the name is Mr. Paul Goldberg, the man behind X Reading.
Thank you very much, Willie.
Thank you very much, Dr. Willie, and thank you, Professor Rob and Professor Paul, for joining us and sharing the links with us. At this point, I would like to welcome Associate Professor Dr. Parna Pitkap.
Or Professor Day first? No?
Oh, you mean, sorry.
Yes.
You mean? Okay, sorry.
Yes.
because it just, okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll just stick to out-of-class learning and autonomous learners, and also how to encourage them to be autonomous learners. So learner training is very important, especially in class. So in class, I think because the reading passage is very limited, the time in class is very limited. So I think if you add something which is something like strategy training, and link that with the passage, it would be very helpful in order for them to carry on and use it out of class. Another thing is that since I am emphasizing the autonomous students to be autonomous readers, so I think helping them to use online tool is very important. Any tools, but online tool is very important, as you know that it is easy. The tool that I use a lot, and it works for me and for my student, is that I use Corpus. It is called wordandphrase.info. They developed the corpus from COCA, which is Corpus of Contemporary American English. So they developed that, and when you want to know the meaning of certain word, you can key in, and then or you can add the text that you you read or you write in that particular particular corpus, and then you can see that when you click on a certain word, you can see that this word is used mainly in which genre. So this kind of thing, they learn more about the word, and they learn and they know that they even put what they write in that corpus, and then they can see that what they are writing is up to what level. Yeah. So I'll put down word and phrase start in 4 in the chat box, so everybody can use that. So this kind of thing is something that I think the teacher should think about, because we are not waiting for them to be in class and then we teach them, but we want them to be more independent. Otherwise, they cannot engage in extensive reading at all. And we all agree that extensive reading is very important because it helps the learners to enjoy reading, to learn more, not just only in reading, but reading can lead them to all life experiences, right? So that's why I think if they are not independent enough, they will be waiting for the reading class, which is not enough, because we can't develop reading competency only just in class, and by the and from the waiting for the teacher. What I mean is waiting for the teacher. So what I would like to suggest at this time is that first, trying to help them to more independent by providing tools. Okay. Second, try to encourage them to read out of class. How? It can be something like you may make it as a project at first, because the students may need to have some marks. And later on, after they are engaged in that kind of thing, it will be better. And the third one is that trying to use online tools, any kinds of online tools, including mobile and other things that catch attention of the learners. Even though from the online, like in mobile learning, maybe they read less than they read from the computer, but still, I think the more they read, the better they would become more interested, and they can gain some achievement. And as you know, that once they achieve something, it would motivate them to learn more, to read more. Yes. So this is what I would like to say.
Joy, there's a very good question from the audience, from Professor Rob Waring. I think that's a very, very important question that Richard Day probably can address. Or maybe we can ask, Rob to speak. And
what was the question, Willie?
Rob,
probably we can also have that like after the session, so we can have some time to entertain the questions, and we can turn on. So
okay,
thank you very much for
that. Later then.
Right, so I'm going to collect them, or maybe we can invite them to converse with us. So that will be more.
Oh yes, that'd be
good idea.
Right, thank you. So let's now listen to Professor Richard.
I've got a couple of things I would like to say, and that is, it had been mentioned earlier about writing after reading. Now, it's been my experience in some of the research that I've done is that a lot of times students are asked to write book reports about what they have read. Now, working with students around where I've taught, I have discovered that students hate to write book reports. Right? Now, I've also researched a number of reading teachers, and guess what I've learned? Reading teachers hate to read book reports. The first 4 or 5 are fine, but when you get to the number 30 or 40, you're out of your mind. You don't like to read it. So I'm not saying we should not have our students write about what they have read, but I would say that my own research indicates that book reports may not be the best way. Now, I've done a number of activities that I've had my students do after they've read a book. This is followed from extensive reading. And so I would like to share with you one particular activity that has been very successful. Now, this activity, and I have done this and I've seen other teachers do it, this activity is called the gift. The gift, the present. In other words, after your students have read a book, have them write down the names of a couple of the major characters. And then think about a gift they would give each of the major characters. And then write a short paragraph, 3, 4, 5 sentences about that gift, why they would do it. And then I would, in class, when they've done the assignment as homework, I would have those who have read the same book get together and share their gifts. And it's hard for me to get the students to stop talking. Isn't that interesting? Because they are really experiencing it. Now, I did this activity when I was teaching reading at Ho Chi in Hanoi, Vietnam. I was teaching at a university there. And I assigned this activity. And what I would often do would be to collect them and put them around the room, the writings around the room. Now, there was one particular woman who wrote about a book called JoJo's Story. Now, this is a fictional story about a young boy who's 10 or 11 years old, who one day went to take care of the village sheep in the mountains. And when he got back, he discovered that the enemy, because his country was at civil war, had come and killed everybody in the village. There was nothing left. Nothing. Think about that for a minute. No animals, no people, his parents, his brothers, his sisters, neighbors, everybody's gone except JoJo. Now, I know you haven't read the book, but think what what gift would you give JoJo? Now, one of my students, a young woman, about 20 years old, wrote this, and I've memorized it because to me, it has impacted my view of reading and teaching reading. She wrote that she would give JoJo love. She went on to say, JoJo has no one to love and no one to love him. We all need love. There is too much hate in the world. Let's love one another. Whew. Isn't that exciting what a student wrote? Mm-hmm. And this was totally on her own. And this was after reading a book, and she engaged in writing. So there are very creative and clever and rewarding activities that we can do as reading teachers for our students. Mm-hmm. It's very, very exciting. Now, also, I should also mention the idea of approaches to teaching reading. This has been some research that I've done, and we're supposed to be talking about practice. Is that right, Joey? Practice?
Yes, practice.
Okay, good. Now, I have looked at a lot of reading, and I've divided approaches to reading into two major approaches. The first one we've talked about here today, called extensive reading, where students, there are many ways about doing extensive reading, but it generally involves students reading a lot of books, choosing the books, enjoying the reading. Now, the second major approach to teaching reading is called, or I call it, intensive reading. Intensive reading. And that has three sub-approaches. Now, the first one is grammar translation, and I've noted this wherever I've been, and I've been in reading classes, and they are grammar translations. You probably were taught reading this way, a number of you in the audience. You are asked to read a short paragraph for homework, and generally the students write the translations above the English, and they come to class. The teacher asks student number 1 to stand up and read the first sentence and then translate it. And the other students are counting. That's the student here. I'm sentence number 5. So they work at that. So they translate it into their first language. Now, the research that I have done on this and others have done on this shows that students learn to translate. But, the B word, but what don't they learn? They don't learn to read because they're not reading, they're translating. But this is a very common practice. Now, the second one is called what I call comprehension question. It's kind of maybe linked with grammar translation and taught in the same way. That is, students will read a short, difficult passage and then answer 100 comprehension questions. Super boring. Now, the little research that's been done on this shows that this will help students taking exams. So they can read a difficult passage and answer comprehension questions, but they don't become readers. They don't learn to read. They learn to answer comprehension questions. And the third approach in intensive reading is called reading strategies. The focus is on reading generally passages that are about their reading level, their fluency level, their grammatical abilities. And then they're taught comprehension questions. They're taught reading strategies. And this is important, but they really don't engage in reading per se. They are looking more strategies. And that's where extensive reading comes in. Okay. Now, I think I've got time for one more comment one more area that I think is very important, and that is in developing readers, vocabulary plays an important role. And it's related to fluency that we've been talking about and learner autonomy. That is, there are what I call in reading 3 vocabularies. 3 vocabularies. The first one is unknown vocabulary. When you're reading, there are words you don't know, period. So I call them unknown words. The second category of vocabulary as you're reading is words that you know, you recognize, but you stop for a short minute, pause, second, and then the meaning of the word comes to you. Then there's word recognition or sight vocabulary. That is, words that you recognize automatically, instantaneously, effortlessly, regardless of context, without thinking. And that leads to, as Willie was talking about, fluency. If you don't have a large sight vocabulary, you can never become a fluent reader. You end up still reading word for word, one word at a time. And by the time you finish the paragraph, you've forgotten what you read because you've been reading one word at a time. So go back and read the paragraph again. Sound familiar? Okay. So how do we develop our sight vocabularies? There's only one way.
By reading.
By reading, exactly. Okay. I think I've overextended my time. I'm sorry, but this is something I could keep talking on for another hour. Okay, everybody. Joey, over to you.
Thank you very much, Professor Day. I think, this round really pointed out several salient points, particularly on not only applying the body of literature into practice, but also making reading enjoyable and be part of everyday practice. How we develop learner autonomy in reading, and also revisiting the teaching of reading. And I think these are very important points. And in particular, these things are very important to discuss the next round, which is the current issues. And I think everyone is experiencing challenges in reinventing the teaching of reading. And in this round, let's try to ask, how should L2 reading be taught during and after the pandemic? So let's start again from Associate Professor Dr. Damrong Kap.
This is an interesting question, and
Yes.
I think about my own students that they have grown up in this kind of digital world. They are familiar with a lot of technology, which worry me a lot, which I'm not. And I think a lot of teachers would feel the same, since these kids, they are multitasking, they are digital reliant, or even they keep connecting online all the times. Okay, and the way that they make use of text would be different from us. For example, they use Twist, they use blogs, they use podcasts, but I do use something, okay, quite similar to them. But I might not be familiar with something that they use like Twist, okay. Then I think what teachers need to do is we need to be open, even though we are not technological savvy, but we have to be open and ready to learn these kind of things, okay. And it seems to me that they are exposed to a lot of information in the digital world. But what we found is that they do have problems. They encounter some kind of new reading challenges in the digital world. For example, there is a lot of information saturation. What I say, that means, when you go to the website, you might not be able to decide which one that you are going to choose. Okay, a lot of sources of information and a lot of misleading, inaccurate, invalid information. Then this might be a point where we can start with, we have to help them to recognize some kind of biased sources, prejudiced source, or invalid source of information. In order to help them to do that, we need to train them to think critically, especially asking questions. Okay, when they look at the source, ask question what kind of information you are looking for, and try to make comparison, from different sources of information, and try to balance the information, whether it's valid or invalid, things like that. Training them to ask questions from the literal level to the advanced level. When they look at that, what kind of information is for, how useful it is, make comparison, okay? And the other thing that I would like to make for reading teacher is, nowadays we cannot just teach them literacy skill, just reading, writing, listening, speaking, and grammar in the classroom. But what I would say, we need to integrate something into the reading lessons, like socio-political issue. For example, teacher can integrate, authenticity of learning experience into literacy lesson. Okay, like last month in Thailand, there was a massive explosion of chemical factories in Bang Pri, Samut Prakan province in Thailand. I have learned from some teachers that they frame some kind of reading lesson by including this kind of thing in their reading, and have their students read and discuss and learn, learn about those kind of chemical, how dangerous it is, and also the kind of chemical that had been released, and even how it's contaminated to the environment. Okay, they try to connect to environmental issue, to health issue. Okay, or even when we talk about pandemic, some teacher even introduce students to learn how like COVID-19 is contagious and spreading and help their kids, develop their literacy skill by reading and discussing reading lesson based on that kind of issue. I think in that part would help our students to expand their world knowledge and also make them aware about what's happening around themselves and train them to be critical. Okay. My last point for this round that I like to make is that we need to provide instruction with empathy. What I mean here is that all kind of suggestions that I just made would be must be at the forefront of all suggestions that I have made. We completely admit that this from the year 2020 is a big change. Okay, it has a lot of impact on our life, our family, community, society, and even the world. Okay, it's not just about the pandemic, and even after the pandemic, there is another thing that's really affect us a lot, which is technological disruption. You can see that last year after the pandemic, we have to change our way of teaching from on-site teaching to online teaching.
Right.
I myself, I'm not familiar with technology like teaching online, like using Zoom. I have to adjust myself within a week in order to learn, how to use Zoom in order to teach online. And I believe a lot of people did the same thing. Okay. And this kind of thing seem to have a lot of impact on, as I mentioned, to our student life either, and also, affect society.
Mhm.
I look at my student, I found that some kids have different experience from the pandemic. Some of them may not have the internet connection at home. Some of them may have to share even a mobile phone with their brothers and sisters when they have online class. And, some of them even experience traumatic or saddened experience, like parents or relatives in their families are losing jobs or even experiencing some kind of serious illness or even death from the pandemics. Then what I would try to say here is that we reading teachers need to be sensitive and be understanding to this kind of situation. Students seem to experience a lot about this kind of thing. Then when we design assignment, when we design lesson, we have to keep this kind of thing in mind.
Yes.
I have heard from my student that they receive a lot of homework assignment from different classes. Then why teacher, especially reading teacher, talk to other teacher, and we can plan, like design assignment, just one assignment to meet different requirements, things like that. That might help them to encounter this kind of situation. Okay.
Thank you very much, Associate Professor Dr. Damrong. Let's now listen to Dr. Really Cap.
Yes, I just want to say that Ajahn Dumrong is absolutely right. During the pandemic, we can't expect to teach the amount of content in the same way. I think we need to reduce the amount of content that we're teaching. The students are experiencing a lot of stress because they're not familiar with the new learning environment. They're not familiar with working from home. They're not familiar with working, under the guidance of their parents or under the guidance of their teachers from a distance. So I think it's important for us to remember that at this point in time, I think we need to reduce the content. But at the same time, we also need to work on students' motivation.
Yes.
We often pay too much attention on the knowledge bit and the skill bit, forgetting that learning, happens when the students have the will and the thrill. So it's not just the skill that we need to focus on, but also the will and the thrill of learning. Please memorize this, everyone. Very important and very interesting to remember the skill, the will, and the thrill of learning. I think the other two have been very much neglected in our teaching. Now, I agree with Ajahn Pon a bit. If the students are self-directed, if the students are self-determined, I think they can make up for the reduced amount of content that they're exposed to during the pandemic. So that's point number one. Point number two is this very, very important question for all of us here. Does it matter? Does it matter whether the students read a digital text, multimodal text, reading on screen, or reading on print?
Right.
Does it really matter?
Right.
To me, it doesn't matter. I can read equally well online, on screen, or on print. But for our younger students, that is not always the case, because there are certain features of the technological devices or digital text that that sort of prompts the students to read very quickly. They skim and scan. They don't stop and think. In other words, they may not be reading the way that they're supposed to be reading. Right. For reading for pleasure, it doesn't really matter a great deal whether you're reading a book, a novel, or reading on screen, because the purpose is reading for pleasure. You just want to get the general gist of what you're reading. But if you are asking students to do some serious reading or study reading, if you like, reading for information, reading to remember and to comprehend at the deeper level, then I think we need to be very careful. Research so far indicates, I think I've seen at least 2 meta-analysis studies examining the differences between print reading and screen reading. The winner for serious reading is print reading. Screen reading for young kids is not wonderful yet because of the tendency, because of the disruptions, because of the interference, and because of the inclination for the students to just skim and skip. Not very good when you do serious kind of reading. So that is something that you need to remind your students that reading is, for serious reading, reading is a purposeful activity. Depending on the purpose of reading, you will read quickly or you will read slowly. And slow reading is probably something that is highly valued in the academic context, especially among college students. They have to read, stop, and think, and continue reading, and maybe annotate the screen text, the digital text. And there are a lot of applications now available for the students actually to make use of. After reading maybe 1 or 2 pages, they can stop and then they can do, all sort of annotation, writing, highlighting some of the text online. That's possible. But for younger kids, I think it's very, very important for us to remember that for serious kind of reading, for focused reading, for close reading, they need a lot of help in reading digital text. Back to you, Ajahn Joy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Willie. I think there's a lot of happening in the chat. We'll be happy to bring them into the discussion later. At this point, let me welcome Associate Professor Dr. Parna Pitkat.
Okay, thank you. I was out a little bit because of the electricity at my place. Yeah, problem. Okay. For the current issues, I think at this time, as Dr. Willie just mentioned, I think affective side of teaching becomes very important. I mean, in the old day, we may look at cognitive more. How are we going to help the learners to comprehend? How are we going to help them to guess meaning from context, things like that. But this time, because everybody is online, and you don't know whether they are ready to be engaged in the class or not. Yes. So the teacher has to be very sensitive at this time, because they have to know the limitation that is very important, and it's impossible for learners to be online 3 hours. In Thailand, at least in Thailand, we have 3 hours class. So how much information that we want them to get, and after that information, what are we going to do with that? So this kind of thing has to be taken into consideration. But at the same time, I think at this time, learner autonomy becomes very important because you want the learners to go outside and then do some other thing. Because during the 3-hour online, it's impossible to cover everything. And it is even less than the normal classroom. So I still think that if you want the learners to keep on reading, you have to prepare all kinds of tools for them, equip them with all the tools so that they can do it outside class. Yeah. Another thing which I think is very important is that you can see that the gap between the students is very wide at this time, because for learners who are very motivated, they may read a lot of things online. They have more time. Is that right? And then, whereas students who need help from the teacher, they may wait until they come to class and then do it. So with this wide gap like this, I think we have to know the learners better so that we can make use of students who have more, who get more knowledge, and then who get more, who have different learning experience, can share with others as well. So don't just take reading class as a normal reading class. I think that we have to think about the learners from different perspectives. After 2 years of the pandemic, I think everything changed. Yeah. It doesn't mean that we have to wait until we meet them on site again, and then we start doing exactly the same thing. Yeah. Because 2 years learning experience would be very different from normal learning experience that we encounter when we teach reading to the normal class 2 years ago. So this kind of thing is something that the teacher has to take into consideration. And I would suggest that reflection, helping them to share what they have done, what they have learned from their reading out of class, sharing with the class something that they learned, such as the new strategies, reading strategies, the new site, which they think it is useful for their friends, things like that would be very helpful in conducting reading class. Not just go straight teach what you are supposed to teach. The teacher should be more sensitive and should be, I think, should take into account learning experience of the learners when they are out of class, when they are doing out of class teaching, when they do extensive reading, things like that. So I would suggest that the teacher should change their mindset about teaching reading. It is very important. Yes.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Let's now listen to Professor Daycap.
Thank you. The three speakers have made a number of very, very important points, really important points. Now, I agree, Willie, those two meta-analyses that you read, I agree. I looked at them. Now, to continue that from a slightly different vein, do students prefer reading digitally, that is online, screen, or print? Mm. And guess what the research shows? It differs. Mm. Some students really like hard copy, others don't care, and others prefer digital reading. So that is nothing definitive, but at least teachers should be aware of that some of their students may prefer reading online. Myself, I'm a hard copy reader, but that's probably because of my age and past experiences. But, pardon? Okay, now, also, I'd like to make another point that came up when I was listening to the speakers, and that is, I would like all reading teachers to bear in mind 2 points. That is, learning to read in contrast to reading to learn. Let me make that point again. Learning to read and reading to learn. We shouldn't confuse the two as reading teachers. In other words, if students are reading to learn and they haven't really learned to read, they'll never be able to read to learn. So we would want to make sure our students are at least an intermediate level of reading ability before we try to engage in more academic reading, which involves reading to learn. To me, that's particularly important. Now, the pandemic has really impacted the classes all around the world. And I have worked with my reading teachers at the University of Hawaii in my department. We have something called the English Language Institute. And there we teach students who are second or foreign language speakers of English how to write, read academically, etc. And in the reading course, we have been making use of X reading. This was mentioned earlier. Paul Goldberg is in the audience. And the research that I've done on this indicates that students, X reading is online. Students read digitally. I don't want to get into a big description of it, but the students that I have worked with and have done some research on really like X reading. And the teachers really like it because it is oriented towards them. They can keep track of what the students read, how many minutes they read, how well they understand what they've read is just really good. And this has helped the teachers in my academic reading classes here in my department at the University of Hawaii. I don't want to be a salesperson for it, but I'm just telling you what I've experienced in my own work with both students and reading teachers here at the University of Hawaii. Okay, now I think that's about my major points that I want to make. So over to you, Joey.
Thank you very much. I think to best synthesize this session, lessening tasks doesn't mean compromising skills development. It serves two things. First, in the side of the teacher, having lesser tasks mean appreciation of students' output. As for the student side, they can become more focused, motivated, and their skills even sharper. Thus, subscribing to what Dr. Willie said, skill, will, and thrill of learning. So thank you very much, our dear speakers. And I think we have so much happening in the chat. And if Professor Rob and Professor Paul would be happy to join us to give some points in our discussion, we would love to hear your thoughts. So shall we start with Professor Rob?
Thank you.
Hi, I'm just looking at this recent discussion about whether people prefer to read online or paper. And I think it depends on why you're asking and what they're asking to do. I think a lot of students would say, I prefer reading online because I don't have to go to school. I physically don't have to travel there. It's much easier. I can read anywhere, anytime. But the question is, if you ask it differently, which is the better reading experience, then you might get a very different answer. Yes. So I think when we're asking this question, we need to say, reading to do what? You know, is it better to read online or paper for motivation, for language learning, for reading fluency, for access? And I think we need to be a lot more granular about how we ask that question. And it's too easy to just put it all together and say reading on paper wins or reading on digitally wins. I think we need to be a lot more granular. And there's some research that's just come out of Cooley by Ajahn Mintra that is looking at exactly this question.
Thank you very much, Professor Rob. May we invite Professor Paul to give us some of his insights?
Sure. I was kind of just going to second what's already been said, especially by Willie, which is, yeah, the research shows that when students are reading for learning, for a psychology class or biology, it's generally better to have print material. They can highlight, they can write annotations. Yes, I understand that can be done in digital devices, but it's just easier when printed. For extensive reading, in which students are typically reading for pleasure, reading a lot, want a lot of options, want to start a book, want to maybe finish halfway through, I think digital, it just provides many more advantages in that case. Also, if students want to read the same book as their friends so they can discuss it, they can easily do that. I think digital, again, I have a bias for digital because I'm the owner of X Reading, but I really do believe for extensive reading, it's superior. And a good example might be news. Many of us, especially older generation, probably prefer reading a book, a print book. Not everybody, but some people prefer a print book. But when it comes to reading the news, how many of us still buy a physical newspaper, a printed paper newspaper? Probably a much smaller number. Richard,
The old guys.
Yeah. Most of us are probably more reading our news online and that kind of more mirrors what's happening with extensive reading. You read one article, you might jump to another, you read half of an article, get bored with it. And so I think that's a good analogy what students are doing with extensive reading. So that's just my take on things. Thank you for letting me contribute.
Thank you very much, Professor Paul. I think a lot of points have actually been addressed earlier, particularly on the resources and all. There's one question that was asked in the chat, particularly on any suggestions about a good fiction or something to read for students.
Oh.
I suppose this could be from someone who is probably teaching a literature class, and we know that they're quite, a lot. So are there any recommendations from our speakers of a good book to read or a good material to recommend for a good fiction class?
I think the best way is not for us to give recommendations, but it's for the teachers to find out from the students, because eventually it's the students who do the reading, not us. Yes. And this is exactly what happened in Singapore. A colleague of mine actually just completed a big survey asking about 2,000 students in Singapore about what they wanted to read. And that's interesting. And there's a list of, books that the students really, really want to read. And unfortunately, many of these books are not available in the school library. So there's a big mismatch there. Yeah. So we should not start by recommending to we can occasionally, but it has to be, a list of books that the students really, want to read. In some schools in Singapore, I think they're very creative. I think they actually give the students, the authority, so to speak, to go to a bookshop. Go to the bookshop and look at their collections there, and name or write down the titles of the book that you really want to read, and the schools will buy these books for you. That's even better. And that is how you can best address the real interest of our students in reading. So I would do that. Ask the students, have a conversation with them. Sometimes the students will tell you, I don't know what I like. And that is when you can show them, hey, these are books that kids in some other places are interested in.
Right.
Take a look at the title, look at the first page, and look at the images, look at the pictures, and see if you like them. I think that would be the approach that we should be taking.
Thank you very much. I think to really cover today's topic, we've covered pretty much on the students' part. I think I would like to bring the teachers now in the conversation, since I have not seen any other questions in the chat.
Yes.
My question is that we know that teachers are quite challenged not only in developing their instruction, but also for their own self-development. I think when we talk about reading, it's not just about reading their students' work, but also doing reading for themselves to be updated with the trends in teaching and even for their own researches. So I think the question should go with, how do we help, or what are the tips that we can offer to teachers in really managing their time to allot a particular space for their own reading time? And anyone who would like to?
Let me try. I don't know. I was thinking about I try to make time. Okay, I try to make time at least say 1 hour at least. Okay, in order to read other things. Okay, and when I did my PhD many years ago, 20 years ago, I know that I have to read at least 2 papers per day. So this is something that I have to make time. Otherwise, if I don't have plan for my life, it's going to, it's scattered. Yeah, and so the only thing is that you have to have plan in your life, and because you know that when you read, you learn a lot of things as well. Right. So, and in traveling, this is the time that I read for pleasure. Always bring something to read. Yeah. Okay.
I second Ajahn Pornapit in that point, that it needs to start from us, that we need to be readers ourselves, keep, reading at least, 1 hour a day in order to update ourselves and practice that. And I also believe that reading teachers are good readers. But from my experience that I have been training pre-service teacher and in-service teacher, especially those who are from not in the area of English, okay, especially those who have to teach, foreign languages, but they have to teach reading in English. It's really hard for them to transfer in terms of reading skill in English to students. Then we might need to provide those kind of training to this kind of pre-service teacher and in-service teacher too, to help them learn how to teach, reading strategies. That might help a lot, I would say.
Yes, 2 major benefits for English teachers. Number 1, teachers who read tend to be happier people. I think that is extremely important because reading is
research on that, really?
Yes, happy people read, unhappy people watch TV. I think there's a study that was done many years ago. But reading is good, actually. Reading makes you happy. Reading gives you pleasure. Reading gives you enjoyment. And happy teachers tend to become better teachers as well. Because if you read a great deal, chances are you'll be able to get the students, to be more interested in reading, to introduce a wider variety of reading materials, and to help students to enjoy reading as much as you do. That's point number 1. Reading in and of itself is good. It makes people, a happier person and a healthier person as well, if you like. Point number 2, now this one is very, very important. If you look at teachers in the region, in many places, in the region, you will find that a lot of our teachers are not confident users of the English language.
Yes.
Yes, from information that I've learned from national data, for example, many of our teachers, English teachers, are still at the at the level of proficiency which is not desirable yet. Some at the B1 level, with a small number at the B2 level, even smaller at the C1 or C2 level. I'm using the CFR scale, as a reference. Now, research again tells us that one of the best ways for people to develop their English language proficiency is by reading, by doing a lot of extensive reading. If you read a great deal, chances are your ability to use the language, to read with comprehension, to comprehend spoken language, and also to read, to speak and to write also improve a great deal. So the benefits are obvious for teachers. Actually, they become more confident users of the English language, and chances are they'll become a more effective teachers, reading teachers, and also language teachers in general. And chances are they will also be able to get a promotion because they've done a good job, and a higher salary is waiting for you, and you become even happier after that. So reading is good for the students and also good for the teachers as well.
So higher salary is the point for happiness, Ajan Willie.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Willie. Let's hear it from Professor Daycaf.
I was just thinking that in my own work, a number of years ago, with a teacher, introduced extensive reading into second semester Japanese at the University of Hawaii. Second semester Japanese. They'd had one semester already of Japanese, and then the second semester, I worked with the actual language teacher and introduced extensive reading into the class. And what I did, we had the first 10 minutes of every class silent reading, and students would pick a book and sit and read in Japanese. Now, there was one major problem with this. At the end of 10 minutes, we had a hard time stopping the students from reading. They really enjoyed it, and some of them would continue to read like this. They had the book, below the desk. And the second point that I want to make about this is that during those 10 minutes, I did exactly what the students were doing. I was a role model. I was reading Japanese so I could learn to become a reader in Japanese. And a number of students told me when I would conference with them that my reading influenced their own reading. Okay. So I think a point to make is that a foreign language reading teacher should be a role model. Okay. Back to you, Joey.
Yes. A member of the audience asked a question, Ruby. What sort of books are you reading? The panel members, what books are you reading at the moment? Reading for pleasure or reading for self-development or whatever? You want to share your reading, the reading that you are doing at the moment?
For pleasure, I like to read mystery and spy novels.
Same as me.
I try to read every night. I don't watch television. I try to get in at least an hour of pleasure reading.
Yes. Rob Waring is reading Homo Deus. Show it again. Rob, Homo Deus. Yes. Yes, that's a book in the second book in the series by Yuval Harari. The first one is Homo sapien, the second one is Homo Deus, and the third one is really, really exciting. 21 lessons for the 21st centuries. I think you should all go to the library or to the bookshop and get a copy of that book. It's really, really exciting book. 21 lessons for the 21st century, but the same person, Yuval Harari. And one book that I like, that I read recently, that I like, yes, that's the name, Yuval Harari, that I like very much is this book, and the title is Late Bloomers. Wow, that book is really, really exciting because it sends a very strong message that every one of us can continue to bloom, whether you are 50, whether you are 60, whether you are 70, you can continue to bloom. You can become better. You can become the best that you can be. Really exciting book.
But at 50, it might be a late bloom,
Yes, I can relate to that book because I myself was a late bloomer. I think I started blooming a little bit when I was 50.
But yeah, we bloom anyway. We bloom anyway.
Yeah.
Late bloom, early bloom, we bloom, right? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, back to you, Joy.
To me, unfortunately, I read thesis most of the time at this time because my students are supposed to graduate. So the 1 hour that I allocate would be reading thesis. But if I have to choose to read for pleasure, I like suspense.
Yes.
So anything which is a suspense novel, I go for that.
Mine is different from Ajahn Pornapit. I love to read something about traveling. Since I want to travel, even though right now I cannot travel, I try to find information and enjoy and think about going somewhere, especially in Hawaii. I would
go to Hawaii, Ajahn.
Yes.
Right?
Okay. But at
Very
least,
nice.
start from what you are interested in and what you love. Okay.
Right. Thank you very much. I think there's one question that we have. The question is, how much time is the ideal for silent reading?
Even in the classroom or outside the classroom?
I think in the classroom.
In the classroom,
Yeah,
right?
because this is a question from a teacher. This is actually my ex-student, my former student from Faculty of Education question. Ajahn Prel.
I guess the best answer is as much as possible.
I would say so too. Yes.
It's hard to come up with an exact percentage of time, but as much as possible.
Yes. Yes, I've seen a study that looks at the relationship between reading stamina, how long you are okay spending time reading, and your academic performance and your reading ability. The relationship is very, very high. And that is probably the most important, the strongest predictor of students' ability to read. The reading stamina, how long you are able to sit still and read a book silently usually is the best predictor.
Thank you very much. We have one question directed to Professor Day. What would you do with the students who have no interest in reading at all? Are you forcing them to read, or are there any strategies you use with these guys?
Well, I ran across that when I was teaching reading in university in Japan. It was second-year university students, and I was having them read a lot of extensive reading. Not also the intensive reading part, but I also had extensive reading. And I had a student who just wouldn't do anything for those extensive reading time in class. So I sat down and talked with him and discovered that it was a male, a young boy, was very interested in motorcycles. So guess what I did? I came up with a bunch of motorcycle magazines and got it and gave it to him. And guess what he did? He read and he loved them. Yeah. So that was a problem that I faced. And I don't know how else, you got to find out what they're interested in and try to relate their interest to possible readings, if possible.
Thank you very much. I think we have one question for everybody. I think we've talked about teaching strategies. We talked about the body of literature. And this question goes along with research, particularly on the research trend. I think the pandemic opened different windows of opportunities in terms of conducting research. So the question is what are the research trends or a good theme for research related to content and language integrated learning in reading?
Do you mean during this time or during the pandemic, or is general?
In general, Azan.
It's in general. I don't know. To me, I think at the moment we tend to link reading with other factors. For example, reading with boredom, reading with other affective factors, reading with how to engage learners through, which is still around, engagement in reading, or other affective factors that may affect reading and self-efficacy in reading. So I think this kind of thing, it depends on the context. It depends on, the context would make it, would make variety of the research. But the recent research that I've seen in reading is around this, including technology, because they try to develop technology in order to develop reading, like mobile learning or some other thing, still around to me. Yeah.
How about the autonomy, Ajahn? Autonomy and self-directed reading?
Yes, they still, it's more out of class, right? At the moment, autonomy diverted to out of class learning. So in out of class learning, it means that you have to be self-directed. Otherwise, you cannot engage in out-of-class learning successfully. So in the area of out-of-class learning and reading, we would see the number of hours that the students engage in out-of-class reading, what types of materials that they use, what strategies that they use, how they feel about it, how they solve the problem, how they are aware of the process of learning, things like that. So this is in the area of out of class and self-directed learning.
Good.
And reading. Yes.
Thanks.
May I add something about this? I think it might be a good idea to learn about readers' experience during the pandemic, how they encounter with reading and how they, I believe they also have some kind of difficulty when they read, no matter what type of text, that could be print, that could be digital, and see how they encounter with this. And besides, I would say it might be interesting to see how readers make use of reading in order to develop themselves as global citizens. Okay, like how they encounter with conflict, especially in our country, in Thailand. You know, we have like democratic movement, those kind of things, and how they, and a lot of kids are interested in this kind of movement. They would like, then we would like to see how they make use of reading in order to encounter with this kind of thing. Or we might want to see in terms of teacher, what kind of reading intervention that they apply during the pandemic. That might be another interesting area.
Thank you very much. Dr. Willie?
Yes, I would look at, some of the dominant research that's been done in the literature in terms of, finding out what variables are important in predicting students' ability to comprehend either listening or reading. The reason I'm saying this is because the pandemic is going to be over very soon. And we are, I think most of us will be back in square one with the big question of what is the most important variable when it comes to teaching reading, when it comes to seeing the outcome of reading in our students. And people have examined two major sets of variables, what is known as the core variables and the peripheral variables. I just came across a study that came out recently in Language Learning. It's a big journal, and the study is on listening comprehension. But the idea, I think, is also applicable for researching reading comprehension. The researcher is a former PhD student from our university, and he investigated a number of variables, peripheral variables, and also core variables. Core variables basically refer to linguistic variables. Reading is a linguistic process. Vocabulary, I think Richard mentioned early on, that vocabulary is very important, for example. That is a core variable. But the researchers are also looking at a number of other variables like strategies, metacognition, and things like that. Very, very interesting. And the author did a very complex analysis. The result, very interesting. Is it core variables or peripheral variables that make a difference in terms of, students' listening comprehension? It's the core variable. And that variable is vocabulary. Again, we are back to square one. Vocabulary is so important in language learning, whether it's reading, whether it's listening, whether it's writing, or whether it's speaking. So our big job remains the same. How can we teach vocabulary in a way that is effective so that we can increase the number of words that the students know? Should be about 3, 4, maybe 5,000 words. But more importantly is how we can help our students develop greater depth of understanding of those words so that they not only know, what the words mean, but they also know how to use the words in speaking, in writing, and also in reading. So eventually it comes down to, what can we do actually to help the students develop this, comprehension skills? either in speaking, either in listening, or either in reading. I can give you the reference. The author is Matthew Wallace, and the paper was published recently, 2020, in a big journal, Language Learning. Language Learning is one of those, big journals in our field. Very difficult to get in.
Thank you very much.
I wouldn't even try.
Before I proceed to Professor Day, let me also open this another question, which I think could be packed with the question I thrown earlier. That would be, what would be great ways to promote home literacy among parents who are not readers themselves, particularly that some parents are becoming like a teacher as well, given the pandemic, right? So how do we promote that? So let's have Professor Day.
I'll pass on that. This is something I'm not familiar with, seriously. And I just don't want to talk off the top of my head and give bad advice. But this is not an area in which I have much information or knowledge. So I'll pass to my colleagues.
You? Perhaps Dr. Willie or Ajahn Pornapit, Ajahn Dumrong.
I think there's quite a bit of research on home literacy. Kids tend to be interested to read if they see their parents reading.
Oh, yes.
That's point number one. Yes. Also, kids tend to read more if they see books lying around at home, newspapers, books, storybooks, and things like that. So that is one of the easiest things that for parents to do. Even if they don't enjoy reading, they can do fake reading. I mean, pretending to be reading in front of their kids. If you have the time, take your kids to the local library. This is what I did when my kids were younger. That's what I did. I did not read to them, but I took them to the library. I gave them a library card. Every Saturday, we would go to the library, local library. The libraries in Singapore are some of the best in the world. They have a huge collection, and the library is really a warm, nice, cozy place. And there's a cafe inside as well. So the kids really enjoy seeing the books and looking at other kids reading. And that's the best thing you can do, providing that kind of exposure, that positive environment for the students to also want to read. I think that is the kind of things that I've seen in the literature, and also from experiences of parents that I've spoken to.
I think I'm sorry.
Yes, and I'm wrong first. Okay.
Okay. I make the point about building partnership with family. Nowadays when we teach online, I think you probably realize that parents also listen to your lesson too when you teach their kids. They also listen and learn from what we do in the classroom. I think it might be a good idea to get them involved. We can, have a talk with parents about what their kids are interested in, and we might train parents too about something that they can do at home that could help develop their kids, in terms of reading. Besides, parents need to read at home as a role model at home too. That's what I would say. And the other thing is, we might get parents involved in terms of planning our lesson. Okay, we can involve them and do some kind of talks to share their experience. For example, some parents are doctors. They might talk about their experience and also share that kind of thing. And we can bring that as a reading lesson in the classroom. Okay.
I think the situation that you asked would be young learners. Is that right? Because if it is the adult learners, you will not involve the parents in the reading throughout the reading process. So I think the suggestion from the teacher or the discussion between the teacher and the parents would be very important for this, because even though they are not interested to read at home, but there are other places outside that they can take the learners to, like what Dr. Billy just said. So the conversation between the teacher and the parents is important, to know that it is very important for that for the parents to encourage the students to have passion towards reading, and then list or suggest some other thing, or a lot of a lot of options that they can do, even though they don't have to read themselves. Because they don't like reading. Is that right? Okay. Yeah. So the conversation between the two parties, I think, is very important.
Right.
Yes.
Thanks a lot to our speakers for gracing this session. We truly learned a lot. And I think it's very important that at this point we understand the different meanings of context. That means the learning context, the physical context, in order for us to really effectively teach reading. And by that, I would like to promote the TEFL's Facebook website if you wanted to be updated with the activities and the talks offered by the Faculty of Education of the TEFL program. Please visit the website, and this is on Facebook. And if you wanted to rewatch the different episodes of TEFL's webinar series, they are all uploaded in the TEFL YouTube. Just look for Chula TEFL and you'll be able to rewatch all of the webinar series that has been uploaded in the site. And thanks everyone for being with us. Hope you have a wonderful lunch.
Yes, but really it's not the time for lunch. It's over the time for lunch now. Well, do we have like Professor Dale with us?
Oh, I think he already left. He said that he would.
So I can't say goodbye to him, but so I would like my last words. Well, thank you very much for clarifying the interesting point related to reading. I think reading is an important skill just to begin with when you study, when you use your time outside the class and everything. Well, thank you very much on behalf of the audience and on behalf of the program that you take this invitation of mine. Okay,ค่ะ thank you very much ค่ะ ขอบคุณนะคะพี่ค่ะ thank you ค่ะ
Thank you, everyone.
ค่ะ
Audience